My wife told me that she was leaving for her boss. This news shocked me, but later I was even glad that it happened. You know, I never thought I'd be telling this story, but hell, here we are. It all started on what seemed like just another Tuesday evening. I'd just gotten home from work, loosening my tie as I walked through the door, ready to kiss my wife hello like I always did. But the moment I saw Sarah's face, I knew something was off. "Hey honey, how was your day?" I asked, trying to keep things normal. Sarah looked at me with this weirdly calm expression. "Oh, it was fine. Listen, we need to talk." Those words, man, they never mean anything good, do they? I felt my stomach drop as I sat down across from her at our kitchen table. "What's up?" I managed to get out, my throat suddenly dry. She took a deep breath and then just said it, like she was telling me about the weather or what we needed from the grocery store. "I've been having an affair with my boss, Mark. We're planning to go on a romantic trip next week." I swear, in that moment, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to say, "Just kidding," or something, but it never came. "Yo? What?" I finally sputtered out. Sarah just shrugged, like this was no big deal. "You heard me. I've been sleeping with Mark. We're in love." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My Sarah, my wife of 7 years, just sitting there calmly telling me she'd been cheating on me. With her boss, no less. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "About 6 months now," she replied, examining her nails like we were discussing something as trivial as a new nail polish color. I felt like I was going to be sick. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of betrayal. And she was just sitting there, cool as a cucumber. "Sarah, what the hell? How could you do this?" I could feel the anger starting to bubble up, replacing the initial shock. She actually had the audacity to roll her eyes at me. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Jake. These things happen." These things happen? Are you kidding me right now? I was practically shouting at this point. But Sarah, she just kept going, her voice dripping with disdain. "Look, I didn't want to hurt you, but Mark, he's just better. Better in bed, better at his job, better future prospects. He can give me things he never could." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't believe this was the same woman I'd fallen in love with, the same woman I'd built a life with. "You know what, Sarah? If that's how you feel, then get out. This marriage is over. You want to go play happy families with your boss? Fine, but don't expect me to sit here and take this bullshit." She actually laughed at that. Laughed. "Oh, Jake, you're so naive. You really think you can manage without me?" I stood up so fast my chair fell over. "Watch me," I growled. "Now get out of my sight before I say something I regret." Sarah just shrugged, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door like she was going for a casual stroll. As soon as I heard her car pull away, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. What the hell had just happened? How had my life fallen apart so completely in the span of 10 minutes? But as I sat there, feeling sorry for myself, something inside me snapped. No, I wasn't going to let her get away with this. If Sarah thought she could just walk all over me and face no consequences, she had another thing coming. I wiped my eyes and headed straight for her home office. I knew she sometimes brought her work laptop home, and sure enough, there it was, sitting on her desk. Thank God she'd never been good with technology. She hadn't even bothered to set a password. For the next few hours, I combed through every email, every message, every file on that computer. And boy, did I hit the jackpot. Steamy emails between her and Mark, detailing their meetups, their plans, even a few, let's say, intimate photos. It made me sick to my stomach, but I copied everything. Then I moved on to our finances. We'd always kept most of our money in joint accounts, something about trust and partnership and all that crap. Well, partnership my ass. I transferred every cent into my personal account. Let's see how she liked being left high and dry. By the time morning rolled around, I had a plan. A plan to make sure Sarah and her dear Mark faced the music for what they'd done. First stop, Mark's wife. I'd met Jessica a few times at company parties. Always thought she seemed nice. Hated to be the bearer of bad news, but she deserved to know. I sent her an email with some of the tamer evidence attached. Next up, HR at their company. Pretty sure sleeping with your married subordinate was frowned upon in most workplaces. That email went out with a nice professional tone and a whole lot of damning evidence attached. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no. Sarah had always been all about her image, about what people thought of her. Well, let's see what people thought of her now. I spent the next hour sending emails to every single one of her friends and family members. Her parents, her sister, her college buddies, even her book club. Everyone got a nice little rundown of exactly what kind of person Sarah really was. Once that was done, I sat back and waited for the shitstorm to hit. And boy, did it hit hard. It started with a call from Sarah's mom. I let it go to voicemail, but the message she left was colourful, to say the least. Lots of how could she do this? And we raised her better than that. Guess the apple fell pretty far from the tree on this one. Then came the text from her sister, Kate. We'd always gotten along well, and her message was full of apologies and support for me. I can't believe Sarah would do something like this, she wrote. You don't deserve any of it, Jake. Let me know if you need anything. But the real fireworks came later that afternoon. I was just considering ordering a pizza, because who the hell feels like cooking when their life's falling apart? When I got a call from Tom, one of my coworkers who happened to be friends with the guy in Sarah's office. Dude, Tom said as soon as I picked up. You are not going to believe what just went down at MetroCorp. Turned out Jessica, Mark's wife, had shown up at the office in a fury. She'd marched straight past security, up to Mark's fancy corner office, and proceeded to tear him a new one in front of God and everybody. There was screaming, there was crying, there was even some file throwing involved. By the time security finally managed to escort her out, the damage was done. The whole office had heard everything, and rumor had it that Mark was being called into an emergency meeting with the board of directors. I've almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. As for Sarah, well, her day wasn't going much better. Her phone had been blowing up non-stop with messages from friends and family, all expressing their shock and disappointment. Her parents had apparently called her in tears, demanding to know how they'd raised such a heartless, selfish daughter. It was around 7 p.m. when I heard a car pull into our driveway. A moment later, the front door burst open, and there was Sarah, looking like she'd been through a war. Her mascara was smeared, her hair a mess, and her eyes red and puffy from crying. "What did you do?" she screamed at me. I just looked at her calmly from my spot on the couch. Me? I didn't do anything. You're the one who decided to cheat on your husband and brag about it. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. They fired him, Jake. They fired Mark. And now everyone knows. Everyone. How could you do this to me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could I do this to her? The sheer audacity of it all actually made me laugh. How could I do this to you? Are you kidding me right now, Sarah? You're the one who cheated. You're the one who threw away our marriage like it was nothing. All I did was make sure you faced the consequences of your actions. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Please, can't we just forget this ever happened? We can work it out, go to counseling or something. For a split second, I've almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered how she'd sat across from me just yesterday, calmly telling me how her boss was better than me in every way. No, Sarah, we can't just forget this happened. It's too late for sorry. I stood up and walked over to the side table, picking up an envelope I'd placed there earlier. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon. She stared at me in disbelief. Divorce? But what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged, echoing her nonchalance from the day before. Not my problem anymore. Maybe your parents will take you in. Or hey, I hear Mark's got a spare room now that his wife's kicked him out. As I walked out of the room, leaving her crying on the floor, I felt, I don't know, not happy exactly, but relieved maybe, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyer meetings, paperwork, and awkward conversations with friends and family. Sarah moved out, staying with her sister while she tried to put her life back together. Last I heard, she'd lost her job too. Turns out companies aren't too keen on keeping employees who sleep with their married bosses. Me? I threw myself into work, started hitting the gym more, reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. It wasn't easy, don't get me wrong. There were plenty of nights I lay awake, wondering where it all went wrong, if there was something I could have done differently. But slowly, day by day, it got easier. I started to remember who I was before I was part of Jake and Sarah. Started to rediscover old passions, old dreams I'd put on hold. It's been about a year now since that Tuesday night when my world fell apart. And you know what? I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I got a promotion at work, started taking guitar lessons again, even went on a few dates, nothing serious yet. But it's a start. Sarah, last I heard, she was working as a waitress in some diner on the outskirts of town. Mark had apparently moved to another state, leaving her high and dry. Her family's still not talking to her, and most of her friends have drifted away. Karma's a bitch, I guess. Sometimes I think about reaching out, seeing how she's doing. But then I remember that night, remember the look on her face as she told me our marriage meant nothing to her, and the urge passes. Life's funny, you know. You think you've got it all figured out, think you know exactly where your story's going. And then bam, one conversation, and everything changes. But that's the thing about life. It goes on. You pick up the pieces, you rebuild, you move forward. And me? I'm moving forward, one day at a time. You know, it's weird. When all this first went down, I thought my life was over. I mean, how do you come back from something like that, right? Finding out your wife's been cheating on you, having your whole world turned upside down in the span of a single conversation. But here's the thing I've learned, you're stronger than you think. There were days, especially in the beginning, where I didn't want to get out of bed. Days where the thought of facing the world, or seeing the pity in people's eyes or fielding their awkward questions, felt like too much to bear. But you know what? I did it anyway. I got up, I showered, I went to work. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it at first, it started to get easier. I remember the first time I laughed after it all went down. It was about a month after Sarah had moved out, and I was having dinner with my buddy Mike. He'd been a rock through all of this, always there with a cold beer and a bad joke when I needed it. Anyway, we were sitting there in this dive bar, and he was telling me about this disastrous date he'd been on. So there I am, he's saying, covered in spaghetti sauce, the girl's yelling at me in Italian, and the waiter's just standing there with this look on his face like he's seen it all before. And I just laughed, like really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't even that funny of a story, but in that moment, it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And as I sat there, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes, I realized something. I was going to be okay. That's not to say it was all smooth sailing from there. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare, even with all the evidence I had. Sarah tried to paint herself as the victim, if you can believe it. Trying to claim I'd been emotionally distant, that I'd driven her into Mark's arms. But in the end, the judge wasn't buying it. I walked away with the house and most of our assets. Small consolation for a broken heart. But hey, I'll take what I can get. The hardest part, weirdly enough, was dealing with other people's reactions. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted to give advice. You're better off without her, they'd say, or there are plenty of fish in the sea. And yeah, maybe they were right. But that didn't make it hurt any less, you know. But the worst were the ones who tried to play both sides. Like Sarah's cousin Emmy, who cornered me at a mutual friend's birthday party about 3 months after everything went down. "Jake," she said, her voice all hushed and conspiratorial. "I know Sarah made a mistake, but don't you think you were a little harsh? I mean, sending all those emails, getting her fired. Couldn't you have handled it more privately?" I just stared at her for a moment, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Emmy," I finally said, "your cousin cheated on me for 6 months, told me to my face that her boss was better than me in every way, and you think I was too harsh." Emmy had the grace to look embarrassed, at least. "Well, when you put it like that—" "Yeah," I said, knocking back the rest of my drink. "When you put it like that." After that, I started being a lot more selective about who I spent time with. Turned out, going through something like this is a great way to figure out who your real friends are. The ones who stick by you, who don't try to make excuses for shitty behavior, who are there with a shoulder to cry on or a distraction when you need it. Those are the ones worth keeping around. One of the biggest surprises through all of this was Sarah's sister, Kate. We'd always gotten along well, but I figured after everything that went down she'd side with her sister. But nope, Kate was firmly in my corner from day one. What Sarah did was inexcusable. She told me over coffee one day, about 2 months after the split. "I love my sister, but I can't condone what she did to you. You didn't deserve any of this, Jake." Having that support, especially from Sarah's own family, meant more to me than I could ever express. It was a reminder that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't overreacted, that what Sarah had done really was as bad as it felt. As for Sarah herself, well, I didn't hear much from her directly after she moved out. Our lawyers did most of the communicating during the divorce proceedings. But every now and then, I'd get a text or an email, usually late at night, when I figured she'd been drinking. "I'm sorry," one of them read. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this." Another time, "I miss you. I know I have no right to say that, but it's true. I miss our life together." And once, about 6 months after everything went down, "I fucked up, Jake. I fucked up so bad, and I don't know how to fix it. Please, can we just talk?" I never responded to any of them. What was there to say, really? Sorry doesn't undo 6 months of lies and betrayal. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust or mend a broken heart. Sometimes sorry just isn't enough. But here's the thing about time. It really does heal. Or if not heal exactly, at least it dulls the pain. Day by day, week by week, I started to feel more like myself again. I rediscovered old hobbies, picked up new ones. I started going to the gym regularly, got back into playing guitar, even signed up for a cooking class. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to remind myself that there was more to life than what I'd lost. One Saturday morning, about 8 months after Sarah dropped her bombshell, I was at the farmer's market picking up some fresh vegetables for a new recipe I wanted to try. As I was checking out some tomatoes, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Jake, is that you?" I turned around to find Jessica, Mark's ex-wife, standing there with a basket of her own. For a moment, we just stared at each other, unsure of what to say. I mean, what do you say to the wife of the guy your wife cheated on you with? "Hey, Jessica," I finally managed. How are you doing?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "Oh, you know, taking it one day at a time." "You?" "Yeah, same here." We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Jessica spoke again. "Listen, I never got a chance to thank you for letting me know about everything. It hurt like hell, but I'm glad I found out the truth." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Yeah, well, I figured you deserved to know." "Do you maybe want to grab a coffee?" she asked hesitantly. "I feel like we might have a lot to talk about." Part of me wanted to say no, to just go home and forget about this chance encounter. But another part of me, a bigger part, was curious. Here was someone who understood exactly what I'd been through, who'd been hurt in the same way. "You know what? Yeah, coffee sounds good." We ended up at a little cafe just down the street from the market. As we sipped our lattes, The words just started pouring out. We talked about the shock of discovery, the pain of betrayal, the anger and the hurt, and the confusion. I keep wondering if I could have done something differently, Jessica confessed, staring into her cup. If I'd been a better wife, maybe he wouldn't have. Hey, no, I interrupted, reaching out to pat her hand without thinking. What they did, that's on them, not on us. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You really believe that? I took a deep breath, realizing that I did. Yeah, I do. Look, we might not have been perfect, but nobody is. That doesn't justify what they did. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. Jessica nodded slowly. You're right. It's just hard sometimes, you know. Oh, believe me, I know. We ended up talking for hours, sharing stories and advice, comparing notes on lawyers and therapists. By the time we finally said goodbye, I felt lighter somehow. Like I put down a burden I didn't even know I was carrying. As I walked home, I found myself thinking about Sarah for the first time in weeks. I wondered how she was doing, if she regretted her choices. Part of me, a small, mean part that I wasn't proud of, hoped she was miserable. But mostly, I just felt nothing. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all still there, but muted now, like looking at an old photograph. When I got home, I decided to check my email, something I'd been avoiding lately because of all the divorce-related stuff. As I scrolled through, one subject line caught my eye. I'm sorry, Sarah. My heart started pounding as I clicked on it. The email was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. As I read, I could almost hear Sarah's voice in my head. Jake, I know I have no right to contact you, but I couldn't let another day go by without telling you how sorry I am. What I did was unforgivable. I know that now. I threw away the best thing in my life for what? A fling with a man who didn't even care about me enough to stand by me when things got tough. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my family's respect. But the worst loss, the one that keeps me up at night, is you. I miss you, Jake. I miss our life together, our inside jokes, the way you always knew how to make me laugh when I was feeling down. I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance at all, that you could find it in your heart to forgive me? To give me another chance? I'll do anything, go to counseling, whatever it takes. I just want to make things right. Please, Jake, I love you. I know I have a hell of a way of showing it, but I do. I always have. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. All the emotions I thought I'd dealt with came rushing back. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. But there was something else too, something I hadn't expected. Pity. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to figure out how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. Another part wanted to ignore the email entirely, to just delete it and move on with my life. But in the end, I knew I had to respond, if for no other reason than to get closure for myself. Sarah, I wrote, I got your email. I appreciate your apology, but I think it's too little too late. What you did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice you made every day for 6 months. I'm not going to lie and say I'm over it. I'm not sure I'll ever be completely over it. But I am moving on with my life, and I think you should do the same. We can't go back to how things were before. Too much has happened. Too much trust has been broken. I don't hate you, Sarah. I'm not even angry anymore, not really. Mostly, I just feel sad. Sad for what we had, sad for what we lost, sad that you felt like you had to look outside our marriage for happiness. I hope you find peace, Sarah. I hope you learn from this and become a better person. But I can't be the one to help you do that. It's time for both of us to move on. Goodbye, Sarah. I wish you well. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not really, but it was something. A step forward, maybe. The next few months were a blur of finalizing the divorce, throwing myself into work, and trying to rebuild my life. I started going out more, reconnecting with old friends, even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, but it felt good to be putting myself out there again. One Friday night, about a year after everything went down, I found myself at a bar with some coworkers. We were celebrating landing a big client, and the mood was light and festive. As I stood at the bar waiting for my drink, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to find a woman smiling at me. She was pretty, with curly brown hair and bright green eyes. "Hey," she said, "I hope this isn't too forward, but I couldn't help noticing you from across the room. I'm Olivia." For a moment, I hesitated. The old Jake, the one who'd been hurt and betrayed, wanted to make an excuse and walk away. But the new Jake, the one who'd been slowly putting himself back together over the past year, made a different choice. "Hi, Olivia," I said, smiling back. "I'm Jake. Can I buy you a drink?" As we stood there chatting, laughing over stupid jokes and swapping stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. I'm not saying Olivia was the one or anything like that. Hell, for all I know, we might go on one date and realize we have nothing in common. But in that moment, talking to her felt like a reminder that life goes on. That no matter how bad things get, there's always a chance for something new, something better. As the night wore on and my coworkers started to head home, Olivia and I decided to grab a late-night coffee. We ended up at a 24-hour diner, sipping mediocre coffee and sharing a plate of greasy fries. "So, Jake," Olivia said, dunking a fry in ketchup, "tell me something about yourself that would surprise me." I chuckled, thinking about the roller coaster my life had been over the past year. "Well, let's see. How about this? A year ago, I was married. Now I'm divorced, starting over, and sitting in a diner at 2 a.m. with a beautiful woman I just met." Olivia's eyes widened. "Wow, that is surprising. Recent divorce, huh? That must have been tough." I nodded, feeling a familiar pang in my chest. "Yeah, it was, still is sometimes, but I'm working through it." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you're doing great. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there after something like that." As I looked into her sympathetic eyes, I felt a sudden urge to tell her everything. About Sarah, about the affair, about the mess that followed. But I held back. Those were heavy topics for a first meeting, and besides, I was enjoying just being in the moment with Olivia. "Thanks," I said instead. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there. Anyway, enough about my drama. Tell me more about you. What do you do when you're not meeting strangers in bars?" Olivia laughed, launching into a story about her job as a veterinarian. As I listened, I found myself genuinely smiling, genuinely interested. It felt good, felt normal in a way things hadn't in a long time. We ended up talking until the sun came up, eventually leaving the diner to watch the sunrise from a nearby park. As we sat on a bench, the first rays of light peeking over the horizon, Olivia turned to me. "Jake, I've had a really great time tonight. Would you maybe want to do this again sometime? Like on an actual date?" I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a surge of excitement. "Yeah," I said, smiling at her. "Yeah, I'd like that a lot." As we exchanged numbers and said our goodbyes, I couldn't help but feel like I was turning a page in my life. The chapter with Sarah was over, painful as it had been. But maybe, just maybe, there was a new chapter waiting to be written. Walking home in the early morning light, I found myself thinking about the past year, about the pain and the anger, the sleepless nights and the tearful days. But I also thought about the strength I'd found, the friendships that had deepened, the parts of myself I'd rediscovered. I thought about Sarah, wondering briefly where she was, what she was doing. But the thought didn't bring the usual stab of pain. Instead, I just felt peaceful. Whatever happened with Olivia, whatever the future held, I knew I was going to be okay. As I reached my front door, I paused for a moment, looking back at the street where I'd said goodbye to Olivia. "Here's to new beginnings. I murmured to myself, unlocking the door and stepping inside. Little did I know, life still had a few more curveballs to throw my way. It was about a week after my night out with Olivia. We'd been texting back and forth, making plans for our first official date. I was at work, trying to focus on a presentation I had coming up, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Jake, it's Kate, Sarah's sister. Can you call me when you have a minute? It's important." My heart started racing. Kate and I had stayed in touch after the divorce, but we didn't talk often. For her to reach out like this, it had to be something big. I excused myself from my office and found a quiet corner to make the call. Kate picked up on the first ring. "Jake, thanks for calling back so quickly," she said, her voice tight with worry. "No problem, Kate. What's going on? Is everything okay?" There was a pause, and I could hear Kate taking a deep breath. "It's Sarah. She's in the hospital, Jake." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. What happened? Is she okay?" She tried to. Kate's voice broke, and I could hear her fighting back tears. "She tried to hurt herself, Jake. The doctors say she's stable now, but it was close. Too close." I sank down onto a nearby chair, my head spinning. Sarah had tried to kill herself. The woman I'd spent 7 years of my life with, the woman I'd loved more than anyone in the world, had been in so much pain that she'd tried to end it all. I didn't know what to say, Kate. "I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" Kate sniffled, composing herself. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. I know this is a lot to ask, especially after everything that's happened. But Sarah's been asking for you. The doctors think it might help if you visited. You don't have to if you're not comfortable, of course. I thought you should know." I closed my eyes, feeling a tidal wave of emotions washing over me. Shock, sadness, guilt, anger. They all swirled together into a confusing mess. Part of me wanted to say no, to tell Kate that Sarah had made her choices and now had to live with them. But another part, a part I thought I'd buried long ago, couldn't bear the thought of Sarah lying in a hospital bed, alone and in pain. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Okay, I'll come. Just give me a little time to sort things out here at work. I'll be there as soon as I can." Kate's relief was palpable. "Thank you, Jake. I know this can't be easy for you. I'll text you the hospital details." After we hung up, I just sat there for a while, trying to process everything. How had it come to this? How had the woman who'd once been the center of my world fallen so far? I called my boss, explaining that there was a family emergency and I needed to leave. He was understanding, telling me to take all the time I needed. As I drove to the hospital, my mind was a whirlwind of memories and emotions. I remembered the good times with Sarah, our first date, our wedding day, lazy Sunday mornings spent cuddling in bed. But I also remembered the pain, the betrayal, the anger that had consumed me for so long. How was I supposed to reconcile all of that with the broken woman I was about to see? At the hospital, Kate met me in the waiting room. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me, she burst into tears, throwing her arms around me in a tight hug. "Thank you for coming," she sobbed into my shoulder. I didn't know who else to call. I held her back, feeling my own eyes start to water. "It's okay, Kate. I'm here now. How is she?" Kate pulled back, wiping her eyes. "She's stable. The doctors say she's out of immediate danger, but they're worried about her mental state. She's been asking for you, Jake. I think she needs to know you don't hate her." I nodded, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Okay, I'm ready." Kate led me to Sarah's room, squeezing my hand before stepping back to let me enter alone. I stood in the doorway for a moment, steeling myself for what I was about to see. Sarah was lying in the hospital bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face was pale, with dark shadows under her eyes. When she saw me, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Jake," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're here," I thought. I was sure you wouldn't come. I moved into the room, settling into the chair by her bed. Your sister called me, she said. She said you wanted to see me. Sarah nodded, tears filling her eyes. I'm so sorry, Jake, for everything. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I needed to see you. To tell you how sorry I am, face to face. I felt a lump form in my throat. Seeing Sarah like this, so broken and vulnerable, it brought back a flood of emotions I thought I'd dealt with. Sarah, why? Why did you do this? She looked away, shame written across her face. I couldn't take it anymore. The guilt, the loneliness, the knowledge that I'd thrown away the best thing in my life for nothing. Mark left me, did you know that? As soon as things got tough, he was gone. And I realized what I'd lost. That I had ruined our relationship, destroyed our family with my own hands. I was just a stupid person. Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. Jake, I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance at all that we could try again? I've learned my lesson, I swear. I'll do anything to make it up to you. I sat there for a moment, looking at the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world. Part of me, a small part, wanted to say yes. To take her in my arms and tell her everything would be okay. But I knew it wouldn't be. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. I'm sorry, Sarah, I said softly. But no, what you did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice you made every day for 6 months. I can't go back to that. I won't. Sarah's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I understand, she whispered. I don't blame you. I wish I could go back and undo it all. I stood up, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. I know, but we can't change the past, Sarah. All we can do is move forward. I hope you get the help you need, I really do. But I can't be the one to give it to you. As I turned to leave, Sarah called out one last time. Jake, I really am sorry. For everything. I paused at the door, looking back at her. I know you are, Sarah. I hope you find peace. Walking out of that hospital room, I felt like I was closing a chapter of my life for good. The divorce was already final, but this felt like the real end. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces about Sarah's life through the grapevine. She'd lost her job at Metrocorp in the fallout from the affair. Most of her friends had distanced themselves, unable to overlook her betrayal. Her family was trying to be supportive, but there was still a lot of tension there. As for me, well, life went on. Olivia and I continued dating, taking things slow but enjoying each other's company. Work was going well. I'd thrown myself into it after the divorce, and it was paying off with a series of promotions. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself thinking about Sarah, wondering how she was doing. But those moments became fewer and farther between as time passed. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all faded, leaving behind a sort of quiet sadness for what might have been. But mostly, I felt, okay, better than okay. Actually, I'd survived something I once thought would break me. I'd come out the other side stronger, wiser, more sure of who I was and what I wanted out of life. One evening, about 1.5 years after that day in the hospital, I was having dinner with Olivia when she asked me a question. Do you ever regret it? Not giving Sarah another chance, I mean. I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. What Sarah did, it changed things. Changed me. I couldn't go back to how things were before, even if I wanted to. And honestly, I don't want to. I'm happy with where I am now. With who I am now. Olivia smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Jake. As I squeezed her hand, I realized that I was happy. Genuinely, truly happy. Friend, leave your feedback on my story.